Not because of status, not because of fame, but because of something far rarer, your divine resilience, chosen one. Welcome back to the truth they tried to bury. The world sees only the surface, your calm, your silence, your smile. But Elon, he sees deeper. He recognizes power when it walks in quiet, makes no announcement, and still shakes the very foundation of a room. You didn't just survive. You made the last move no one saw coming. Like a grandmaster in spiritual chess, you didn't waste time proving yourself. You waited, watched, and when the moment came, you made the silent move that flipped the entire board. Checkmate. The result? A room full of stunned faces, the fake friends, the traitorous family, the watchers cloaked as lovers, the envious ones who laughed while plotting your downfall. Now, they're rattled. Because you moved in truth, and they can't predict someone protected by the divine. That's why Elon Musk, a man who thrives on foresight and unexpected brilliance, admires you in secret. Because you are the kind of force that can't be manufactured, only born. He knows what it takes to change the world, and he sees that same energy in you. So stand tall, stay quiet, because when the universe sends you admiration from the minds reshaping reality, it's a sign. Your spiritual victory just went global, and the world, it's starting to notice. They anticipated your outburst. They assumed you would plead. They believed that you would break like them. Instead, you moved as if you possessed supernatural intelligence. Instead of just leaving, you carried out a cosmic checkmate. Let's face it, some of them are more scared by your calm than they were of your anger. Now they're pacing floors, contacting people who don't even like them, and searching Google for what does it mean when someone doesn't react after betrayal. And with good cause, because someone who was never eligible to seat at your table was exposed by your last move, which did more than just finish the game. Hold on tight, because I'm going to reveal why they're spiraling, why the vibe changed, and why your silence just revealed the whole thing. Let's begin. First of all, your last action revealed their psychological reliance on your demise. They were always covertly relying on your failure, rather than just observing you. Their aim was for you to fail. Your ascent would reveal all they are unwilling to change about themselves. Not that they didn't trust in you. They would be forced to acknowledge the fallacy of the justifications they have been using if you made it. They would have to acknowledge that they had the opportunity to grow, change, and heal, but choose not to. Therefore, you exposed them, rather than merely disappointed them when you didn't come apart the manner they required or anticipated. Even though they never explicitly said it, being superior to you was central to their identity. They felt superior because of your suffering. They were comforted by your delays. They played expertly in your life from the sidelines while you remained silent, giving them the impression that you were trapped. But that story was shattered by your final move, which was planned, quiet, and unexpected. You didn't blow up, you didn't plead. Not even an explanation was given. You just moved in a new way. Since they now had to face the reality, that action rocked them more than anything else. It declared, I no longer live in the world where your opinion of me matters. They never considered you beneath them. They were really transferring their own stagnation onto you. They were lying to themselves the whole time, as your progress just shown. Because your mending would make them seem indolent, they required you to remain shattered. Your voice has power, therefore they required you to be quiet. And because your awareness would negate their deception, they required you to remain perplexed. You were becoming, not just existing. And they sensed it when you made that last move, spiritually as well as emotionally. It was the indisputable proof that you are just who they had feared you were all along. Selected, not broken, and not weak. They are unable to ignore it now. Second, you did not respond. Without a word, you altered the whole story. Although your last move was quiet, it completely changed the course of events. Drama, mayhem, and some kind of emotional breakdown were anticipated. They were anticipating your outburst, your clapback, your revelation, and the outbreak of war. Instead, you made a silent movement, and it was a keen stillness, not a blank one. It was sanitized. It was the last one. You weren't giving up during that quiet. You were entering a new world of power where energy speaks louder than words, and no explanations are necessary. That was unexpected. They saw your stillness as a sign of perplexity. They believed you were still broken, still seeking explanations, and still trying to make sense of things. You weren't lost, however, so you weren't quiet. Since you were already aware of the story's conclusion and had come to terms with it, you kept quiet. You were already 10 steps ahead, so you weren't responding. They were afraid of it. You didn't just leave. You did it in a manner that made it clear that you had already seen every ploy, every deception, and every phony apology before they were ever made. Everything was torn away by your silence. Not that you were at a loss for words. It was that there was nothing to say. No one could continue to pretend that they were blind to the truth, which was hovering in the air like a dense fog. Your energy speaks for itself. That change hit them like a kick to the belly. I see everything clearly. I know who I am now. I'm not available for games, for guilt, or for gaslighting. Your failure to respond caused the whole atmosphere to shift. You changed, and that progression made it clear who was in charge all along. You were holding on tight. You were taking back control. Your silence concluded the story, not just the discussion. They're now trapped in a book that you no longer write. Third, you acted as if you were aware that the divine was supporting you, rather than only observing. You didn't move in a survival-oriented manner. You acted as if you were aware of a stronger force behind you. They were shaken by it. Your previous action wasn't impulsive or sentimental. It was accurate. The moment was right. It exuded a confidence that is impossible to mimic and undoubtedly unteach. Only when you know deep down that you're being directed can you have that level of clarity. For the first time, they recognized they were never in control when they saw it. Not of the tale, not of the result, nor of you. When others can't read you, they get uneasy. The realization that they never understood you in the first place, however, is what really frightened them. Because they were judging you from the outside and were unable to sense the divine intellect you were traveling with, they undervalued you. You weren't just picking a decision. You had a task to do. It was also spiritual rather than emotional. People who are motivated by insecurity and ego don't understand that type of behavior. Only those who understand what it means to walk with purpose may understand it. They believed that your strength was derived from willpower, but in reality, it came from alignment. You didn't make a guess. The inner voice that never deceived you was speaking to you. They advised you to disregard your intuition. They made fun of the signs. Even when it didn't make sense to your human thinking, you heeded the nudges. You have the advantage because of it. Your final move seemed so untouchable because of it. You weren't responding to them in any way. The timing of your response was heavenly. They finally understand. They are aware that you are protected in addition to being perceptive. Not only are you intelligent, but you've been picked. You were sent to win, not merely to win. That is a menace of a different kind. It indicates that they are not battling you. What's behind you is what they are battling. And they are retreating, reconsidering everything, and silently questioning how they ever believed they had a chance after coming to that knowledge. Fourth, your promotion wasn't a cry for forgiveness. The bridge they thought you would crawl back over was burnt. They assumed you would come full circle. They believed that you would ultimately lose it and come crashing in, demanding to be seen, validated, and answered. However, you didn't. There were no breadcrumbs left by you. The door was not left open by you. You proceeded as if you had no intention of turning around, burning the bridge in the process. And they were really shaken by it. They eventually saw they were never as crucial to your fate as they thought, not because you vanished. You didn't inquire as to their motivation. You didn't try to find out why. You denied them the ability to know that they elicited a response from you. Cleanly, fully, and without apology, you simply disconnected. And your silence was a language they weren't ready to comprehend in a world full of people screaming for closure. That realization struck hard because they are now stuck with all the things you never said, all the apologies you never asked for, and all the moments they believed you would play again. It didn't say, "I'm hurting." Instead, it said, "You were never that significant." However, nothing was replayed by you. Without them, you completely rewrote the script. You eschewed the appearance of resolve in favor of your tranquility. You came to the profound realization that not everyone, particularly those who attempted to shatter you, should have a front row seat to your recovery. They believed that they were a part of your tale. However, it was evident from your departure that they were just a paragraph or a phrase. You had clarity, which was better than waiting for closure. And you had the courage to act as if you already knew the truth because of that clarity. They have no right to harm you. You weren't. They just thought you were giving them permission to be there. They're beginning to understand that the true loss wasn't you departing now that you're gone. It was their inability to see you after you were cured. Fifth, your energy didn't just change. It was gated spiritually. Not only did your energy shift, but it changed in a manner that made the door lock behind you. It wasn't pushy or noisy either. It had a spiritual quality. Words couldn't really describe what occurred when you made your last move. They denied access. You were letting people into areas of you that they were never emotionally or spiritually prepared to manage, and you saw this for the first time, not out of spite or resentment. The gate descended after that clicked. They sense it now. It's in what they can no longer feel, not in what you say. You're no longer warm. Your candor was sealed. When they tried to manipulate you, guilt you, or use sweet language to get back in, the invisible rope they used to pull broke, and they keep receiving the same response. Denied, regardless of how many times they try to connect with you, follow your energy, or attempt to spiritually hover over your life. They are now experiencing withdrawal from the access they believed they would always have. They never imagined that the light would cease to illuminate them. They never imagined you'd stop coming up, explaining, forgiving, or giving. However, they are finally acknowledging that they misused the gift of your presence. Not only were they immature, they acted carelessly. They failed to protect your devotion, love, or soul. They can't even get near enough to act like they've changed now that your energy is caged. You're not resentful either. That is the main thing that screws with them. You're not upset. You're not getting angry. You're not posting mysterious remarks or dragging their name. You just vanished. And without you, they're at last realizing what they never understood while you were there. They had access to your soul, your knowledge, and your serenity. It wasn't a random act. It was holy. That door is now permanently closed. The unfortunate thing is that they now recognize your worth. Only now, however, have they lost it. Sixth, they didn't even anticipate that you would outgrow their capacity to control you. They had you under their thumb because they were so sure of themselves. Their strength for the longest time sprang from the belief that you still need their approval, that you continued to doubt yourself, to repeat what they had said, and that you still held out hope that they would one day see your value. They managed you that way. Emotional leverage, not physical force. They used your allegiance as a weapon, played with your empathy, and fueled your self-doubt. Everything fell apart when you made your last step, which was a quiet revolt that said, "I no longer need your permission to stand in my truth." Since they were still playing the same old game and believed you were the same, old version of yourself, someone who was frightened to go alone, easily convicted, and who only desired peace at the expense of one's own dignity. They failed to see it coming. They didn't make the transition, however. You were outgrowing the whole stage while they were practicing the same deceptive scripts. And their grip was totally broken when you made that last move. Without crying, without speaking, without requesting closure. Nothing they used to do works anymore, so they're scurrying. Guilt trips don't work. The phony worry seems pointless. The flattery is unsuccessful. You're not going to bite. You're not giving an explanation. Most importantly, you're not becoming smaller to accommodate them. What hurts the most is that you didn't just leave. You left without requiring their explanation. Power is that. Because someone loses all power when they are unable to influence how you see yourself. They are unable to distort your story. Your reality cannot be altered by them. They cannot change your perception of yourself. And losing access to the version of you that still felt you needed them was what they really dreaded. Not losing access to you. You don't now. Their whole blueprint was wrecked by that knowledge. Seventh, your tenacity was calculated rather than conspicuous. They thought your silence meant you were giving up. They saw your apparent passivity, composure, and silence. They also believed you were losing. They failed to see that you were analyzing the situation each time you remained silent and opted for calm over commotion. You weren't lost. You were strategic. Instead of an emotional collapse, they received a surgical departure. No announcement, no drama, no residue. You just walked out clean. Additionally, it was obvious from your actions that you weren't trying to avoid the battle. The whole conflict was too much for you. Conflict-loving people always assume that quiet equates to capitulation. But your silence was a tactic, not a sign of fear. They never realized what you did. Not every war is worth winning, particularly when it's a nasty, rigged, and unworthy battlefield. You were aware that you had no authority to argue or slap back. Your strength lay in maintaining your composure, conserving your energy, and leaving in a manner that made it impossible for anybody to accuse you of coercion. You remained in charge. You are an expert at it. They were most affected by it. You made a clean last move. It was so intact, so lofty, so unconcerned. They had nothing left to pick up and twist. They were abruptly left standing in a place they never imagined you would depart, thanks to a clear, intentional change in your energy that stated, "I'm done here." There were no dramatic signals or emotional outbursts. Without the audience, without access, and without the capacity to continue luring you into a vicious loop from which you have already broken free. Because it didn't have to be, your tenacity was quiet. Their language was loud, not yours. You made noise, yet you moved with clarity. You chose the higher route because remaining would have betrayed who you were becoming, not because you were afraid. And they finally notice it now that you're gone. Your silence wasn't a sign of weakness. Everything they believed they could control was destroyed in the quiet before the change. You didn't just withstand their sabotage, number 8. It helped you fine-tune your frequency. They believed you would be crushed by the sabotage. They believed that you would disintegrate and never get back together if they could only sow enough uncertainty, drama, and confusion. It wasn't only that they wanted to harm you. To ensure that you never rose again, they were attempting to eliminate you. They didn't anticipate, however, that the same fire they plunged you into would eventually cause you to develop something you were unaware of. It wasn't merely a wise choice, that last one you made after all the confusion. It had a spiritual quality. The cosmos received it as a sign that you were no longer the person they were attempting to destroy. You didn't just leave. You went up. Furthermore, your elevation wasn't arbitrary. It sprang from anguish, betrayal, and pressure. You weren't meant to live. However, you improved your frequency rather than folding. The same energy they used to get to you no longer powered you. You break up relationships with patterns, as well as individuals. You began acting from your knowledge and stopped reacting from your hurts. That explains why your previous action was so forceful. It was more than a choice. Because betrayal was really a forced initiation. It was an announcement. I've been initiated. It forced you into an unchangeable, unaffected, and undeceiving version of yourself. You transformed, not only grew. Now that you've gained spiritual fortitude, they're haunted. Not only did they lose access to you, but they also contributed to the development of the unquestionably powerful version of you that exists now. Your calling was confirmed by the same tactics they tried to destroy you. Self-defense is not necessary. Your brightness speaks for itself. You don't need retribution. The truth was already revealed by your ascent. You weren't just lost, you were certified by them. Knowing that their sabotage didn't destroy you but rather validated you is what keeps them up at night. You thrived in plain sight. Number 9. Embarrassing their evil goal. They were so certain that you would disappear. They believed you would be left shattered, resentful, and buried as a result of the harm they inflicted behind your back, in secret, via deceit, manipulation, and deliberate sabotage.